Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting solopreneurs share their startup stories. They also deliver tangible strategies that they would implement personally if starting their business over today. Each episode is a startup masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Maria Brito. Maria, thank you for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hi, Kevin, and everyone who's listening. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me, and I'm ready to roll with you.
Well, I noticed just by our brief chat here, I noticed what a Mississippi, Alabama accent here. Is that about accurate?
No, I was born and raised in Venezuela. So I'm a Latin American woman who moved to the States 23 years ago. So I've been here for actually more, 24. I've been here half my life.
All right.
And what you're hearing is a mix of New York and Latino.
A little Caracas and a little
Actually,
Queens.
yes, I was born and raised in Caracas, believe it or not. I think of another time and era because that's a country that has literally ended by any
yeah.
in itself. But yeah.
That's actually a really sad story to see. I mean, I can look back in history and just see all the great things that Venezuela was responsible for. And hey, if nothing else, you have Dave Concepcion, who played shortstop for the Cincinnati Reds.
That's a very, very interesting angle to think about. The baseball players are usually really good, or used to be. Anyway,
no doubt about it. Well, let me start this, but just to get a little background. So, if you and I were at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
I'm an art advisor and I'm a curator, and I also help companies and individuals develop their creative thinking for innovation, for reinvention, and to profit from that, obviously, because we want to make sure that we are compensated but for our amazing ideas. But first and foremost, I am an art advisor, which means I build art collections for people around the world, and I make sure that I select things that gain financial value, just like any asset, and that fit their aesthetics, their ideas, their purpose. And it has to do a lot with financial planning. It has to do a lot with estate planning too, because art is a very, very strong asset that grows in value like crazy.
Yeah.
And but it's a very fun and interesting profession and business that I carved out and built on my own, because I used to be an attorney and I was a very miserable attorney. And so I invented this whole thing for myself 13 years ago. And my company is industry leader nowadays. And, I also took everything that I learned during this time to teach it to companies and people in the areas of leadership and creative thinking. And that's what we're talking today, because I have a book coming up and a lot of fun things to share with the world.
Well, we're starting to dig down a little deeper and talk about the book later, but I'm just really curious just about the art space as a whole and how, the NFT kind of the whole introduction of NFTs. It looks like it came from nowhere, in the last 12 to 18 months. I'm sure it hasn't, but somebody in your industry, but how has that affected the kind of the art industry as a whole?
It doesn't, I don't think it has affected it. If anything, it's just made it's just ballooned the numbers even more, because when you add what transacts in all those websites every day, it adds billions and billions of dollars. Remember that it's like the barriers of entry are so low. Anybody who has a computer and is willing to do a digital illustration and mint it on the blockchain has an NFT, right? And so that person needs to find a buyer. And since we have millions of people with crypto, and people got crypto 10 years ago for like, $30, and now it's like $1 million, you know what I mean? So then when you count on that type of commodity, if you will, because I don't see crypto as a currency, but it's an alternative, then the NFTs really can go to the highest value without really having value, if you know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's a series of numbers that are written on the blockchain, and the digital asset is a digital asset. I mean, that's it. Anybody can actually have that digital asset because it's just a picture, or it is a little piece of an animation, or it is a video. And those things are just out in the world. I think that when you add the idea of Gen Z, who have basically developed themselves in the world of gaming and the internet in a much deeper way than millennials, the truth is, because technology is so commonplace
Yep.
and so available. And so when people are thinking along the lines of the metaverse and what is the future going to be, it's not that we're going to be living in chambers where, like, I mean, like, we have to eat, right? Like, it's not we're going to be living in chambers with, like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, and we're going to be wearing green, you know, costumes. No, I think it's more that you have to think about the where we are, right? And so where we are is that we have spent 2 years in a semi-isolation, if you will, because some people have, depends on the state.
Yeah, exactly.
Depends on the state. But in general, right? And so people have been able to pivot into a virtual life where we can do what we're doing right now, which is very wonderful and helpful because we get to share and meet people all over the world. But we also have seen kids doing remote education, companies doing remote meetings. And so the metaverse and the NFTs are an extension of all that.
For
When
sure.
the moment was ripe, and so things happened because it, you know, artists have been doing the NFTs for a while, but when one of them gets $69 million and he's a relatively unknown person, not for the community that he was actually playing with, a community of crypto, community of people who love animations. So when people offers to partner with Christie's, and you have to think about how smart it is from both parties, right? Christie's is one of the most blue chip, fabulous auction house with the most incredible machinery in marketing. And then you have this guy who's actually paying attention to everything that's happening. He's a graphic designer and illustrator who had gotten some traction doing animations for J-Lo and for Justin Bieber. And then he's actually watching the market of crypto by far much more than he's watching the art market. He barely had any idea of what the art world meant.
Yep.
And then he's like, and if I do this, what could happen? And it happened, you know. And so the interesting thing that any entrepreneur can learn from this guy, and also the move from Christie, but mostly from the artist, is that when you're paying attention to industries that are outside your industry, you're going to have a lot more success than when you're just the super mega expert on what you do, right? Because you can do everything within your industry. You can read every publication, you can go to every conference, virtual and online and whatever, but everybody in your industry is doing that. This guy, what he was doing is, like, he was in a different industry. He was in the industry of crypto. And now he is the third richest living artist. I mean, not richest, the artwork is the third most expensive work that has sold at auction from a living artist, behind Jeff Koons and David Hockney, who both of them have had like insanely long careers, retrospectives around the world in all the museums and whatnot, right?
And some dude with an iPad over here just made $69 million because he was paying attention. I mean, I love the statement you made about watching or getting outside of your vertical, you know, or getting outside of your industry, and how that is like that's a separator, you know, and that's a differentiator in this space for sure.
You absolutely must. Otherwise, as I'm telling you, you're going to miss all the things that happen in the intersection of industries, all the things that happen in the margins. And the reason why, as an entrepreneur and business owner, and even in your career, you have to look at those spaces, it's because you know, you want to make sure that you can attract or bring those things to your own industry and adapt them, right? What can you do when you look at crypto? What can you do when you look at kids playing video games all day long, the way they do, and how, for example, games like Fortnite have revolutionized also the space of gaming because it's interactive. It's
Yep.
like, like these children are having concerts on Fortnite, which is a similar thing to what the metaverse is proposing, right? And so you live with a skin and you have a name and or like a nickname or whatever it is, right? Your avatar. And then you're playing with somebody who is in London and you're in New York City. I have kids, and so I know this for a fact, right? And you don't even know how those kids look like, but they have this kind of skin
Yep.
and this avatar, and so that's who they are. So the next day it's like, hey, it's like the Black Panther. That is the world that we live, and we absolutely must not conform, but we must pay attention to everything that's happening and meet the world where it is, because otherwise we're going to be left behind. And if you own a business, you don't want to be left behind.
That there's so much that you said in the last few minutes, just kind of freewheeling, in this whole space. But there are so many applications and cross applications of the things you said, because not only, I mean, you advised people to get outside of the vertical. Even in your discussion, you got outside of your own vertical. I mean, just because you talked about so many different industries. But
oh my God, I can't help it.
hey, no, I think, I mean, that's the way you think. That's just the way you're wired. God made you that way to think that way. And so I think that the one thing that you camped on, I promise I'll move on after this NFT question.
Yeah,
But
okay.
so what I don't understand about NFTs, and I think our listeners would love to know too. I mean, this is an attorney speaking too. Does it operate like a trademark or a copyright? How do you protect digital,
Well,
the
the
digital creation?
NFT itself, what it gives you is property rights, but it doesn't give you copyright, because the image can be like, for example, let's go back to the example of people. If you want to go to his website and download the whole thing for free, you can, right? And you can project it on your wall if you want. You can print it and paste it on the wall, etc., etc., right? Whatever you want to do with it. Now, what the NFT does is that it grants property rights to the guys who bought it, and they can sell it anytime they want by using that NFT. Again, right, like the blockchain, it's the ledger, right? So if I am the owner of a house and it's written in the property registry and whatever, and so every time I sell that house, somebody else will, I mean, I don't rip the house out of the floor. I go and I transfer the paperwork and it's all registered, right? And so that's what happens to an NFT that is backing a digital artwork. So what happens is, for artists, they now have the possibility of programming, let's say, royalties. So every time a piece is sold, they get a percentage of that, which is something that is revolutionary if you think about it, because artists, once they sell something, they lose control over it forever. The other thing that the NFT brings is certain level of transparency on terms of ownership. Who owns this, right? Like, I'm sure you've like seen all those documentaries or read in the stories. Like sometimes very important artworks get lost, right? Like you don't.
Yeah.
Not only they get stolen, that's not the story. It's like you don't know who owns them anymore.
Right.
And what this would do is, like, at least you will be able to trace which was the last transaction, so who owns it now, right? What the NFTs will do in the future, though, is that once you buy a tangible piece of art, a painting, a sculpture, and whatnot, it probably will be accompanied by an NFT that is just going to back that up as both authentication and traceability, and also the potential royalties that I'm telling you about. So once you want to sell that, there will be some sort of system that will say you cannot sell it unless you also sell the NFT. That's one way of doing things. But other artists are just coming up with crazy ideas and saying, well, should you keep the real thing or should you keep the NFT? And so that's also a game that was done by Damien Hirst recently. He sold, I think, he offered 2,000 works on paper of his famous dots, and he sold them accompanied by an NFT. But he said, in 1 year, I'm going to come back to you and you have to tell me if you want to keep the paper or if you want to keep the NFT. And one or the other is going to be destroyed, because he's actually getting data, but he's brilliant, and he's betting on, like, what is going to be of most value for these people? Is it going to be the NFT, which, you know, is going to be on the ledger, or is it going to be the piece of paper that they can hang on their walls? So
Crazy.
yes, it's crazy, but it's
Crazy.
fascinating at the
Oh,
same time.
absolutely. And I can tell you've spent a great deal of time kind of diving into this. So, I mean, you're just riffing on everything that you're not even looking, you're not looking at notes. I mean, this is all coming out of, your mind right now, just that, just experience. But, um, I, there are so many places I could go right now, so many different directions. I mean, you kind of laid out this beautiful mosaic of opportunity here, but
Let's
I'm
go.
I'm just curious, just personally, just talk about your transition. You said I was a very unhappy attorney,
Yeah.
and you kind of recreated yourself and recreated an opportunity for yourself. So walk us through that, because so many of our listeners are thinking, I'm stuck in a cubicle. I hate my job. I want to do something different. Walk us through that transition of kind of the recreation, the genesis of, ideas and how to put them into practice, and just what's your story? What's the backstory?
Yes, thank you for asking the question. It's it's also part of the reason why I wrote the book, and it's also part of the reason why I wanted to share these ideas, because it all sort of happened at the same time, but we are going through the great resignation, as you
Yeah.
know, and people are kind of figuring out what to do after having to evaluate what's important in their lives. And as I told you, I grew up in Venezuela and I moved to the States, and I followed the path of a dependable career in something that my parents planted inside of me that was not me. I wanted to be a performer and a singer and anything that was related to entertainment and things like that. And they were like, no. And it's, a lot of children will say I want to be a singer, but I had actually the talent, and I was like in every contest I always won, and why not? But when it sort of like became things that were a little bit more serious, and I had all these bands asking me to go on tours with them and whatever, they were like, no, it's not going to happen. That's not for you. In this house, you're an attorney, a doctor, or an engineer, or something like decent, according to them. Like, that's a decent career, right?
Safe. Yeah.
Right, safe and decent.
Mhm.
So I ended up sort of like giving up on my dream and following what they thought. And also I said, like, look, I mean, whatever, what's the worst that can happen, right? The worst that can happen is that you lose your life, basically. But I did that, and I practiced law in New York in big law firms, corporate law firms. That's what I mean, big law firms that had corporate departments. That's what I did for about 9 years, and I was incredibly sad and miserable because it was not for me. First of all, being an attorney is a really difficult thing because you get paid really well, and that means those law firms own you,
Mm.
and you have to put in the hours because it's billable hours, and there's nothing creative, is very packaged, everything is in a manual, and you become a little bit of a slave of the partners and the clients who are paying an inordinate amount of money in
Yeah.
billable hours, right? And so millions and millions of dollars in lawyers' fees. And so I was very sad, seriously, and like tired, I mean, like, I don't really have words because like the worst state, right? And so I got pregnant with my first child, and I was seriously thinking, even before I got pregnant, what am I going to do with my life? And so once he was born, I was like, I can't really leave this child alone forever. I can't also not teach him the value of being authentic and doing the things you like and you love. And so for a long time, I gathered my ideas. I sat very seriously with this thought, and I took a lot of notes. I went very deep into meditation. I did all the things that I could have possibly done. I also explored what other careers could I just
Mm.
go after. And honestly, there was no way I was going to be back in an office with a boss and stuff. And so I told my husband, look, I wrote a business plan for a business in the art world, and I'm going to be an art advisor, and he thought I was absolutely nuts, and uh, he's like, well, I'm sure that your hormones are not all together, and he was right. Actually, look, I mean, he wasn't mean, he wasn't being a jerk. He wasn't judging. He actually expressed this with concern, right? Because also he wanted to protect me from taking or making some like moving forward and taking a step that could have been potentially fatal, right? I mean, what if like I send everything to hell and then I was like, oh my God, I should have stayed, right? No. So I did all that. I took my 401k, I quit, and I hired a like all the things I had was like I hired a web designer and I found a woman who was helping me with messaging, communications, and things like that, right? So this was all I had. And I just ran with it. I ran with the idea. I ran with the desire of making meaning, like finding this purpose and to doing things that were important and gave me joy and excitement and like a desire to wake up every day and hustle, right? And it worked out, man. It worked out. And I think it takes creativity, it takes courage, but every leader and every entrepreneur who succeeds is courageous and is creative. And if it's that person is not creative or does not consider themselves, whatever, creative, I think that it's hard to actually leave a mark in this world, because what the world needs and the people who actually succeed are those who can differentiate themselves and those who can offer things of value. And that means that you constantly have to be rethinking your strategy, shifting yourself. And so that is the story of my transition. And it's again, it's persistence, and it is finding also those opportunities that I was, as I was an outsider, I was watching everything from the outside and I was paying attention to what was missing, paying attention to what people were not doing, paying attention to, and I don't know, this is like a similar thought occurred to me. Have you ever been like as an outsider of something? Let's say you visit a hotel or a restaurant, you said, why nobody does this?
Yep.
Or why is it like this is done like this? Or, can they just train their people differently? I mean, so many thoughts occur to us all the time when we are visiting or experiencing something that is not our areas of expertise, right? What I did with this new business was exactly that. It's like, why are people in the art world not really capitalizing on the internet? Why are these people really so hermetic? Why are these people so snob? Why are they not teaching? Why they're not using, blogs? And like I saw so much potential of the things that we're not doing. They are so stern, they are so boring. Yet, the art world is fascinating. Artists are fantastic. There's so much to be learned, and there is so much to be seen, yet everything is so dry and like everybody wears black. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? And I was like, no. There's people are just like, they were giving a manual like I was given when I was an attorney, right? And they are not breaking it, but I am going to come and break all that. And so I
Your own
did.
advice. I mean, you followed your own advice. You just see that transition, that as you're saying, I was looking outside of my vertical. I saw the kind of the gaps in the market, the things that could be improved
That's
on.
exactly what I did.
But for sure. But so I got a question for you. So as you're speaking to our audience, as you're speaking to those that would want to make this transition, so it's one thing to say that, hey, I have a spouse, I have a partner, whatever that is kind of also providing income, so I can kind of take a little bit more of a leap of faith here, versus speak to somebody that, is has those golden handcuffs that you described, sitting in a cube, that wants to work somewhere else. That's a much more difficult, leap, if you're leaping from a consistent salary, insurance, benefits, all those things, into kind of the no man's land, or kind of the unknown. So speak to that specifically, if you're speaking to somebody about taking that leap of faith.
Look, I'm sure you're aware of this statistic that since 2020 up until today, the amount of filings for new businesses in the United States grew about 30% or 25%, which is a number that hasn't been seen since the 1940s. And why is that?
Post World War II, yeah.
Yeah. So why is that? I mean, there is dissatisfaction, obviously, or people have lost their jobs, or people have found out that they didn't want to be where they were, right? That's the. But there is also something else. Capital is really cheap right now,
Mm-hmm.
and so oh yeah, but like this is something also occurred to me. Well, yes, capital is cheap. So you can actually get a loan right now, or you can actually get investors, and you can figure out what you want to do if you have a solid plan. I remember last year somebody told me, well, we just did not apply for the PPR, whatever, the payment protection, because we were not going to get it anyway. And I said, well, how do you know that? Because all the people I know in small business got it. I didn't apply because my business is solid enough that I don't need that money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I prefer, but like, well, because we just didn't bother. And I said, have you been paying your taxes? Like I actually went and dig a little bit, because when people come with excuses, they haven't even done the work, right?
Yeah.
So like, well, but you know how hard it is to get capital. Oh yes, I do know how hard it is to get capital, but have you done the work, the legwork? Have you like checked on the requirements? Have you checked on the small business office administration? Have you checked with your bank? What are, I think that, and I hate to say this tackiness and cliche, but if there is a will, there is a way. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so
Yep.
I
Good
don't
word.
want to minimize the anxieties that people who are in need of getting all these benefits and their paychecks, but I think that eventually being miserable in a job is going to show, and you're never going to be as young as you are today. That's the thing, right?
Mm.
Whether you are 30 or you are 75, you're never going to be as young as you are today. So if you keep postponing that and pushing it for a better time, that is never going to come either. So massive action is one of the things that and it trickles throughout the book. My book is that it doesn't matter how many amazing ideas you have, because ideas are a dime a dozen. And if you do not execute them and you don't work on them and you don't take action, you're never going to see anything happen in your life, right? And so I feel that if you are so concerned about the job that you have and losing all those things, well, you know, experiment a little bit with like consulting. I mean, is this something that you could potentially do on the side a little bit, right? In other areas that maybe it's your own area, but you just hate where you're working right now. So can you do a little bit of consulting with other clients? Oh, but how am I going to get there? And how am I going to tell them? Well, start talking to people, like you have all this expertise that you have accumulated in this job or jobs that you've had. You, I'm sure, have a lot of transferable skills if you want, like I had, right? I knew how to write. I knew how to read. I knew how to see. So it was not rocket science. I wasn't going to operate brains either. I decided I wanted to work with aesthetics and art, and I had a very good eye for things. I love, colors and shapes, and I happen to have a specific type of taste that resonated with the clients who came to me too.
Mm.
So, but every beginning is hard. Everything takes time. Apple wasn't built in 2 days, neither Amazon. None of those things just happened. I read something yesterday. Elon Musk said on Twitter, right? I worked 16 years, 16 hours a day, 365 days, and people say I'm lucky. And and so the thing is, I know this things my son, I don't know. I just hope people are kind of like following the thread, that I'm not saying that things are easy, and that you're going to find a lot of ups and downs. In any entrepreneurial path has a lot of downs, and you have to kind of ride the wave the best way you can, and have the ability to be nimble and have the conviction that you can figure out other ways, right? But I am telling you that without creativity, those things can't happen. And I think that it's not a coincidence that LinkedIn scanned all the data of 800 million professionals, and the number one skill that people are looking for is creativity. And it's the same professionals who are hiring people say is the hardest to find. And so the World Economic Forum also said it last year, that creativity is the future proof of the future of I mean, is a future proof of your job. And IBM conducted this incredible study. It was many years ago, but IBM changes every year the focus of what they are trying to get. So they conducted the study in a 1,600 or 1,700 CEOs around the world, and in very, very different industries, and asked them, what is it that you need the most from people who work with you? And they said creativity over management, discipline, and integrity. So they don't care if you're if you have integrity, as long as you have creativity. I think this was some of the things that you read and you're like, I can't believe I'm reading this. Yes, I was reading that. So consider yourself already to be creative and embrace that concept, because as human beings, we are born extremely creative. We just unlearn it, and we just have to relearn it. We unlearn it because as we go through formal education, and we have all these rules, and we're imposed this amount of rules, regulations, unquestionable theories, and then we are giving our kids and ourselves, standardized test. And so how can you actually measure somebody's intelligence through like marking X's or filling in circles, right? With just one answer is right. I mean, I get it, is the way the system has been developed, but it's not accurate. And I think that, we deserve better, honestly. And I also think that it's important for people to acknowledge that they are creative, and that it's within themselves, all that millions of dollars of ideas inside of each person that can come out in any way right now if they work on them.
I am just sitting here trying to creatively figure out a way to wrap this bow together, because there is so much here. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, we don't need a 30-minute interview with this lady. We need to sit down with a cup of coffee and let's let her unwind for 8 hours.
Oh my God.
You
my
have
pleasure.
so much that there's so much there that we just scratched the surface. So we're going to have to schedule some repeat opportunities here for you to come back. But there's so much here, and we, like I said, we just scratched the surface. But I would be remiss if we didn't give you the opportunity to kind of talk about your book as we're closing shop here today, and just tell people kind of what the basic framework is around the book, and where they can find it, and where the best place to connect with you.
Yes. So the book is called How Creativity Rules the World. And the subtitle is The Art and Business of Turning Your Ideas into Gold. And so this is a book that it took me 13 years to write, basically, because it was from the time I transitioned as an attorney until right now. But it is a very well-researched book where I combine history, neuroscience, psychology, concrete data, studies, etc., because I want to prove to people that they can be creative. And so I also want to prove to people that creativity is an amalgamation of skills, and it's just not a God-given talent, and it has nothing to do with artistic ability either. So whomever is listening to this and you're an accountant, you can be creative, you can save money to your firm, you can actually figure out ways of doing things faster, and that is actually being creative. And so it's available to all of us. We just have to work on certain skills consistently. And this is the thing, right? You work on things that actually make you better. The same thing that if you go to the gym once a year, it's not going to get you fit, right? So it's like, this is work, but it's fun work because it's for your benefit. And so the methodology that I developed it's basically structured in 4 different parts. It's like, the first one is how to align yourself with the idea of creativity, and how to debunk every limiting belief that you have learned so far. And I actually gave science and psychology and research and studies that actually debunk all those myths. And then the second part is all the skills that people have to hone, and they are easy things, honestly, but people have to work on them. And the third part is the tools that you have to use on your day-to-day work to come up with those ideas and how to combine different ideas. And because also creativity is a lot about combining ideas that are disparate, that things that don't make much sense together. And the last part is about how to see the future. Is my favorite part of the book, but you need to know the other first, the first three, to understand how to see the future and how to apply that to your business or career so that you're always 2 steps ahead of everybody.
So don't start at the back and work backwards. So read through from the
Yes,
first to
and
the
look,
end.
it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop. Go to your independent bookstores and ask for it. I mean, we love to hear from people who have been ordering and pre-ordering it from independent bookstores around the country, because those are the lifeblood of, you know, the economy of books and reading and the publishing industry. So you know, you can get it on Kindle, there is an audiobook, etc. It's everywhere where books are sold, massively distributed by HarperCollins. Thank you, HarperCollins. And I think it's going to be a joy for people to read, because also it's timeless. And at the end of each chapter, there is a bunch of exercises for people to practice what they learn on that chapter. So it's highly, highly actionable. It's not just theory. There's no theory, actually, as I'm saying. It's like a lot of storytelling, a lot of my own personal moves, how I built my company and how I branded it. And I think it's really going to be extraordinarily helpful for people who are feeling stuck. And that's one of my objectives. If you're already creative, it's going to help you. And if you're not, it's going to help you too.
And they can find more about you at mariabrito.com, correct?
That's right. That's right. That's where I am.
Hey, thank you so much for taking time tonight. It's been a real pleasure to engage and just really hear your story. And I have had the pleasure of just sitting back and kind of listening to this unwind. It's been tremendous. So thank you for just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Maria, have a great evening.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care. And thank you, everybody who's listening. I appreciate the opportunity.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.